go. CFB 900 live on a Friday. In the next 900 seconds, from a betting perspective, we'll break down 3 games for you with the prop specialist, the Waterboy, who's going to be joining us each and every Friday for the rest of the season. Waterboy, we are on the clock. So let's just go ahead and dive right into the first game we want to talk about, Notre Dame at Arkansas. We'll go ahead and jump right here, and let's take a look at the current prices. Seeing 4.5 across the board. Looks like 63.5 on the total, 64 at Bet Online, 64 at Buckeye. I think you have a couple player props for us, but definitely want to get your thoughts as well on the side and total in this one.
I mean, it seems almost kind of like a very square bet at this point for the total over, but it's one of those where both defenses just have really struggled this season, and it seems like there's just certain issues with those defenses that aren't something that you get corrected, and it's not been something that has just been against one opponent or a certain style of how the offense plays or schemes. It really has been kind of just a consistent issue on both these teams. For Arkansas, stopping the run, which Notre Dame is very good at, and for Notre Dame, stopping the pass, which Arkansas is very explosive with. Bobby Petrino there, that's really his style. And so these are just 2 teams that are going up against offenses that stylistically they've been very poor against, and they're both have issues with injuries and other things that just they're in coaching that seem to be a little bit deeper than just a 1 or 2 game issue. With the spread here, the way Arkansas has played, it is one of those where they have just blown games that they could easily be 4-0 right now, and they're at home. And I think, there's Pittman on the hot seat. He knows if he can win this one, that it goes a long way to keeping his job. And same with Notre Dame. They really need to get back on track. So both teams definitely will be intense here. Both have a lot to play for, even though, from the college football playoff picture, nobody's really discussing them internally. These are 2 programs and coaching staffs that really need this one.
I know you put out on X, maybe on Wednesday, the over for Taylor Green passing yards at 250.5. I found a local book that was hanging 246.5. It's certainly moved since you put that out. So could you talk us through the Taylor Green passing prop?
It moved to about where I would have expected it to be. I was thinking around 270. This is something that just whoever Notre Dame is going against, they have had a lot of success passing. Beck only had 200 yards, but he was very efficient. They got a lead, wanted to kind of run out the clock. That offense is a little more kind of short ball, throwing it around, not really trying to take a lot of deep strikes. Mario got very conservative there in that game. They probably should have been more aggressive. This is just a Notre Dame secondary that they're rotating 8-9 guys, which creates a lot of communication issues. And biggest issue with them is they seem to be very poor at disguising their coverages. They're showing man, they're showing zone. They're not really hot. They're not able to hide a lot for whatever reason, whether it's players, whether it's coaching. But they're really been vulnerable to the pass because they're not doing a good job making the quarterback figure out the defense post snap. They're letting him know where he wants to go. He's able to read it, and they just are at a historically bad defensive point this early in the season. They're near in the hundreds in all these passing metrics, all these defensive metrics, and a lot of it seems to be the defensive coordinator. They want to get him fired. I mean, it's bad enough that they've done it before with another defensive coordinator, Van Gorder, after 4 games. So, I mean, it could get to the point where they fire the defensive coordinator, Ash, mid-season if things keep going this way. And Green here, he's 16th in yards per pass thrown. And so he's right around Aguilar, Simpson at Bama, Hoover at TCU, these guys that have big pass yardage games. And while he doesn't, he's not throwing a ton and completing a ton in not having a 27-42 line, they have a lot of explosive plays. He's somebody that Notre Dame, they have not been able to really pressure the quarterback at all. And so he should have time. And, they're going to be wary of his rushing ability. So I think that kind of puts them in conflict a bit. So I just think it's a really good spot for quarterbacks and offenses when they play Notre Dame right now, and I thought that line was at a good spot to take it.
So you'd still recommend a play on Taylor Green passing yards over 268.5?
I would, yeah, I might go down to a half or like 75, 0.75
Gotcha.
of a unit, but I think this is right around where he'll probably have looking at it, if things go well, he'll have about a 280-yard passing game, and he does like to run. Pittman mentioned he's been a little banged up. And, as the season goes, you kind of try to get your quarterback to run when needed, but you don't really try to utilize him a lot in called runs and things like that.
Gotcha. Moving on to our second game of the day, we're going to discuss Georgia Tech at Wake Forest. Current prices on the board. 14 at Circa, but juice 13.5 at FanDuel. Total sitting currently at 52.5, 53 at Sports 411. 52.5 Buckeye. So we'll just call it 52.5. There's a juice 51.5 at FanDuel. So Waterboy, what are your thoughts on the X's and O's and the matchups here in Georgia Tech at Wake Forest?
I think this is a spot where Wake Forest could give them a game. I think that Georgia Tech can play very sound. I think that they've got really good coaching. I think this is a game that Georgia Tech should win. I don't know. I could see them winning by 10 points. I could see that. The thing that does is Wake Forest quarterback has been a little bit turnover prone. But big thing here that really kind of stood out was their wide receiver Barnes, freshman. He has been utilized a bit, but it's definitely an interesting situation where you have the starting wide receiver, Carlos Hernandez, was getting most of the targets. And he was somebody that not just, a junior on the team, he transferred over with the head coach from Washington State who took the Wake job, and he was recruited by him, played for him for 2 years. And so came over and, was just, kind of in a sense automatically given the starting job with seniority and expected production. But right now he's sitting at on targets a 37% completion rate when targeted. Barnes is at a 76% completion rate when targeted. And so this is just something that for the first time, Barnes is ahead of him on the depth chart. They've had 16 weeks since then, since the last game they played Thursday night to this one coming Saturday, to knowing that clearly, they made the decision heading into the bye to do this. They've probably installed a little bit more for him. He's been very sure-handed. He's very explosive, utilized in the screen game, deep ball. And so I think this is somebody that just is probably going to break out a little bit more than expected, just because he's been near that line or hitting it with his current usage. And just I think usage is really going to increase here. Coach at the end of one press conference, just when asked about the switch, he was very complimentary of Carlos, had a lot of faith in him, but, he said he's got to do what's best for the team. So I really expect him to be utilized a bit more. And right now, I would say that if his line's bumped up into about the mid 50s, high 50s, and you miss this prop, a really good spot too, depending on price and yardage, you can get something in the low 20s on longest reception at like maybe 23.5 for longest reception is probably just as good of a play, and something that if price is better compared to that mid 50s line on Barnes receiving, that is also an option.
It's also worth noting in this game that Georgia Tech has a bye next week, and coming off obviously this huge win against Clemson, they're kind of sitting in the driver's seat as far as making that ACC title game appearance. And they could probably take their foot off the gas here, knowing they're a 2-touchdown favorite at a, undersized, undermanned Wake team. So I like what you're saying there as far as Wake coming off of the bye, getting more geared up for this game, and Georgia Tech kind of knowing like, hey, maybe let's just get out of here with the win. Maybe they keep things more vanilla to get prepared for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think that, they might with Barnes, keep him, want to keep a lot of things in front of him, maybe play a bit deeper. But this Georgia Tech secondary and defense has been good, but there's nobody really in the secondary that I look at and think, okay, they can put him on him and really kind of smother him one-on-one. And it's not just, utilization in that way. They definitely do want to use Barnes deep, but he's really been utilized just as much in the screen game or kind of in the mid range across the middle of the field. They've utilized him in a lot of different ways. So I think, it's one of those where whatever defense Georgia Tech wants to sit in, that they'll find a way to get him the ball, because they have Claiborne at running back, and they've shown that, Wake Forest is a team that they've got Barnes and Claiborne. They know who their playmakers are, and they want to try to get them the ball.
Final game we'll discuss today is actually one of the biggest games of the week. Ohio State at Washington. Let's go live to the odds screen and take a look at what the current prices are. Way down here at the bottom. Ohio State currently laying, looks like 8.5 with a total of 52. Bobby Digital and I broke down this game on Wednesday, but Waterboy, I think you have a pretty interesting take here on not just the tight end matchup against Washington's defense, but also the thinness at linebacker for Washington. Just my 2 cents on this game. I did play Ohio State. I laid the 9. I like what you're about to share with us. I guess to steal your thunder. A lot of people are focused on Washington's offense, but I think there's not enough focus on Washington's lack of defense. They certainly did not show up against Wazoo team that had a lot of success in the first half passing. And I think maybe Julian saying will have a lot of success here in this game, which could put Washington in a hole and make that offense of the Huskies one-dimensional.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where if you there's a lot of focus on the dynamic quarterback with Washington, and I think he'll get his. I definitely think they'll score points. I think that 13.5 definitely totally different outlook on that than a 9.5. I definitely think 10 points is very doable for this Ohio State team. A lot of these players have played in big games, so I don't think the road environment will be too overwhelming for them. I think when you move away from Ohio State is a bigger defense. They're not as fast as they are just big. That's why they have such success in the red zone. And I think, if they can keep things in front of them, not give up big plays, that we'll see just how much of a dual threat quarterback the Washington guy is if he's having to run the offense from 25 yards and in to score. So, but big thing on the defensive side is Washington had a very good defense if you'd have looked in, pretty deep at linebacker if you'd have looked at them in August. But they've had an injury to one linebacker. Another one has not come back to play as quick as they thought due to an injury that's just not healing as well. And then they've had another injury there at the end of the Washington State game. And so they've got starters now that would have been your second string, and they don't have much game experience. And then their backups are basically, kind of scout team guys. And so Ohio State, I think, they'll want to really kind of test them running the ball early, see how they do fit in the run, see how they do, really get into the point of attack. So I think they can have some success running the ball going at them. But biggest thing here is I think with Claire, you've got a tight end that they just didn't have much faith in early on due to his his poor blocking, and they want to do that with a lot of tight ends. But I think you've seen from Dave's comments that he's been a little hard on him early on, a little more favorable comments going into the Ohio game. You saw he had 2 catches for 30 yards. I think they've had that bye week, so he's now had time to really kind of work on his blocking, get installed more in the offense. And so, there have been rumblings from beat writers and moderators on boards that Washington's kind of the game where they're looking to see if he'll break out or be used more, kind of the game they'll need him. And so I think this is a guy that just has the perfect body to make those catches, get open against this weak Washington linebacker core, just kind of attack that middle of the field. And I think it's something that he absolutely has been targeted. And Ohio State loves to keep their tight ends on the field. And if his blocking has improved, he'll be on the field a lot more than he has been these early games.
Yeah, Max Clear currently with 6 targets on the season, just 4 catches. So, like you're talking about, probably a secret weapon for this game or a guy that they want to get more involved.
It's been something that, you look at the games they've played, and he had 3, he had about 3 of those targets against Texas. So right off the bat, and then you play games like Grambling and Ohio, and he's not on the field much at all. He's not used much. They're not wanting to show anything. And you've got a lot of production from these other tight ends, but you look and go, okay, this was, you had this big catch in the 4th quarter against Grambling. So that's probably not as applicable to playing on the road against Washington, where they're going to pull out a lot more of their playbook. And his line when you started off against Texas was 50.5. So now
Wow.
down to the 21 range. So I think this is with the way things are kind of sounding, this is a really good buy low spot.
All right. So to recap our bets for this Friday's show with the Water Boy, we like Max Clare going over receiving yards against Washington. We like the wide receiver at Wake. Remind me his name again. Barnes, right?
Barnes.
Yep. And what was the total yardage for that player prop?
Claire started off 21.5. I think he's up to 24.5. I still think that's good. Barnes started at 49.5. I think last I saw he was sitting around 51, 52.5. And then Green was 250. He's up to 268.
Gotcha. So we're starting to see some market agreement with the player props you already gave out earlier this week.
Yeah, hopefully, CLV doesn't pay the bills, but it's definitely a good indicator to be on the right side of things. So hoping
we have had a few gravestones so far on this show of CL in the CLV graveyard. So definitely understand what you're saying there. That'll do it for today's show. You can follow the Waterboy on X at the Waterboy_TI. You can follow this show on X at CFB900. You can also follow us on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you want to get your podcasts. Bobby Digital and I will be back here on Sunday. The Waterboy will join us again next Friday. On Sunday's show, we'll give you our recap of everything we learned from week 5 week 5. So Saturday, everything we learned from Saturday. And we'll also come back to you with some best bets and some early market openers. So that'll do it. Best of luck to you guys tomorrow and see you guys Sunday. Adios.